Kachonach yeke yochsatini, iltakat Johan, wasa achtu yeke wush da ati, ya yeki. Akatsu wush kanakachtu da at, iltakatwe kejin yeki, zutat ewe, klinket, stukach tultu, ye ewe achtuasagu, e.
What? What class is that?
Oh.
Class is that?
Aka away. Kasagu aya achtuasagu ha'in chsatiyi. Kakwaak aya yi kakwashatu. Yata kayata. Aka away. Jadasa away adat tiudatan khat khanaibus. Helwasa kakwatiyak. Yewa achtuasagu etundatani tin. Yisuku. Adeiliyach yetiyata. Helwasa kakwatiyidat. Achwa ohan. Keltul ani atwutisatin chikler. Kautua akawe hayukatangi ayashtutultu. Yankoa. Kasachan katilla antin. Ye aweka gachtu ak. Ye aweka gachtu ak. Gunalchéesh acheti sa achiyayeki. Gunalchéesh, everybody. I'm so happy we're together again. We plan to gather every Friday and kick this thing back off. I hope everyone had a nice, restful, wonderful break. And I'm really happy that we're studying Tlingit together. My goal is to teach you some of this stuff, teach you some of this stuff, talk. And I really want to hear your voices as you start to learn more and try things. Ask anything. It's a good place to ask questions. And just kind of getting us back into this mode of learning. Just want to say this is a safe place and nothing bad is going to happen to you. Some of us, when we try to learn our language, we encounter things that are unkind. And some of us might have a journey that involves people being unkind to us about our language, knowing it, not knowing it, trying to know it. And so we just want to say that we have a word, deishli, which is a sheltered harbor. Like if you're in a canoe and the weather turns bad, you're going to look for a safe harbor. And that's my hope, is that that's what this is like for you, and that you feel good about trying, and you feel good about being here, and you feel good about doing this, because sometimes it involves a lot of complex emotions, memories. As we start to go further as a group, sometimes you might feel like, I'm not catching up with the group, or I'm ahead of the group. So just sort of thinking about those things. I heard another phrase. It's I'll type it in the chat after I say it. It's kataku hinyach nakati itu. So let me type it so I don't forget. So kataku hin yach nakati itu. And I'm gonna put a bunch of lines. I don't know. I don't want the underlines on the G to get lost. So anybody recognize anything in that phrase? Kataku hin yach nakati itu.
River or water?
Hin is river or water.
Tuwu, spirit or feeling or inside.
Yeah, tuwu, spirit, feelings, thoughts, intentions. So that gets us to yach and nakati. So Tlingit verbs do change a lot. So there's a verb yati, which a lot of us have probably heard, and wasa yati or yach yati. So when you say yach, so yati is to be, right? As far as just a verb, like so wasa yati, how you be. Yach, when you put yach in front of it, it does change a little bit. So yach yati. Anybody know what that one is? If I say yach yati.
Like something, or like we use it for colors.
Yeah, so it's like that. So yachyati. So let's say yati is to be. Yachyati is to be like. And then, so that gets us like, and so when you say naqati, you're saying let it be. So I guess the hit album and song from the Tlingit Beatles would be Yen Qati. Yen Qati, Yen Qati. Right? We wrote that a long time ago. Chak, chak away, kautujihin. Um, so then that gets us to kataku, and I will write Daisy in the chat. Uh, so kataku, there's a verb in there uh, that means for water to run clear, to settle. So, for example, if I had a clear container, like a little aquarium or something, I'm just gonna mute that. Okay, I think it is me. So if I had like some clear container, like a little glass box, and I went to a place with glacial running water, like real silty glacial water, like Wushitluhin, which is the name of the Mendenhall River, as some people call it. Mr. Mendenhall just put his name all over the place, or somebody did. I don't know. Wushitluhin is the river that runs itself murky. So if you just scooped out that water, it would be murky water. You'd see all these sediments in there. And in Tlingit, sometimes that's a visual metaphor of things. If things are murky or like resembling some sort of whirlpool, that's leaning towards chaos. Just in the way we sometimes look at things. But if I just put that on this table and just left it for an hour or so, and I came back, all those settlements would go down. That stillness would allow it to just run itself clean, kind of. So that's called kataku. There's a verb, kautaku. Kautaku would be like it's settled, and all those sediments went down to the bottom. So katakuwuhin yachnaqati ituwu. Let your feelings or your thoughts or your mind or your spirit be like water that has settled because it's calm, it's peaceful. So those are some things that I like to share as we kind of get started again, and we just keep thinking about uh, ways that we can learn Tlingit, use Tlingit. Uh, we'll just sort of continue to think about. Hold on. Okay. And we'll just continue to think about ways we can learn Tlingit, use Tlingit. Some folks might be new here, so we're going to think about like how we're going to start, what kinds of things we're going to start studying. But I guess I'll just ask you folks, uh, any questions you have, any language things that you've been thinking about, and maybe we'll start with that.
I have two.
Hmm.
The first one, I was looking at colors on the Sealaska resources yesterday, and they have one neixeenté.
Mm.
What is that?
Okay, let me find that thing real quick.
It's in the advanced colors PDF.
So here is, and just so you folks know, when we look at things here, what I like to do is we look at it as a group, and then afterwards I post our class online, and then I will put a link to this up so that you'll have the link to it. So yeah, this is a poster of color. So on the left, you have an image of what the thing is. So tuch is charcoal, and then tuch yachyati is black. So this is how the colors work. And there's some that I think are more common than others. But Yaro Vara did a ton of work and worked with a lot of speakers. Um, gosh, a long time ago, 15 years ago, maybe 10, and put this poster together. So as you go through, you might have thoughts or questions about some of these things. If you're an inland person, neixeenté is not part of the vocabulary because they don't live up there. But then we get, I've always heard this as neixeenté, neixeenté. And this is um, let's go look at the description in the dictionary. How long? We'll go find it. So one of the things I've been trying to do in this dictionary is trying to get some explanations of things. I got this idea from Zeus James Crippen, who was working on an encyclopedic dictionary of Tlingit, which would mean the entries would have, so if you have something like Kushta, you wouldn't just see land otter, you would see a bunch of information about Kushta, because there's a bunch of stuff about Kushta that we tend to talk about. So
Screen.
yeah, and but it has cultural knowledge in there as well, so that if you read it, you're like, oh, that's why people get scared when I start talking about this thing, And so neixeenté is right here. So neixeenté or neixeenté, and so this is, if you think about the three main colors of Tlingit artwork when you do like carving and stuff, you got the black and the red. And then there's this kind of turquoise, but kind of a greenish turquoise. That color is neixeenté. Uh, it is a mineral. It's called, so, we do know what its scientific name is, so then you can look it up and find out exactly what it is. But what I do know about it is when they would go get it, they would sort of get in their canoes and they would really be ready. So sometimes you you really got to be ready. And when you go to harvest neixeenté, for some reason it creates a huge storm. And so we're gonna have rough seas, and usually there's only like certain places you can go to get it. So there was always these kind of stories like, okay, we got to go over here and get it. But as soon as you take it, like the weather's gonna turn really bad, and so you're gonna have to just really get that canoe gliding, yanashit, so you can get home quickly. Um, and yeah, I was talking to Yeshedi, Nathan Jackson, about this as well. And so it is something that we talk about, the artists talk about, that Tlingit speakers talk about, but it's something that I would say it's not a common knowledge thing anymore, and it's probably something that we should all know. So I'm really glad that you asked that. So yeah, that's the name of the thing. So you could argue that nachein is a word that's maybe related to nehin, but perhaps. And so we call it nachein. That's the word for a chilkat blanket, and it's nachein in Haida. So could be something related there. Great question.
Sheesh.
No.
And my other question was related for like if you wanted to like say make a label for a box of stuff and the stuff in the box, the name for that thing is dependent noun, would you use the pronoun with it? So like kaye, would it be akaye on your label?
Oh, so like well, so like a pattern? Is that what you're talking about?
Ah,
Yeah, akai would be a pattern. And so yeah, there are certain nouns that want to belong to something. Like they always want to become, yeah, dependent noun or um, inalienable noun. And so there are some things that are like that because the pattern can't really, it has to be a pattern of something. And so that's what the And so if you ever worked with the old dictionary of Tlingit that came out in the 1970s, a lot of things you looked up would say something or do something. And so on its own just means it's. So like if you had, um, for example, like an animal, and so you had like a little nusk or something, and you were just happened to be referring to its jin. You would say a jin. So that's what the does. So yeah, I would say akai would work really well in that.
Mm.
Good questions. Okay. Let's see. Oh, there's a question that in the chat about ikach gunalchéesh KTOO yati. So I would probably say. So the ikach gunalchéesh KTOO yati. Uh, so the word gunalchéesh, like this means thank you. It also is a verb, although you don't really move it around like a verb used to. It kind of got frozen. And so usually we just use it as just that single word, gunalchéesh. But then sometimes we were talking about this in, I think, our intermediate class the other night. So you could say things like, gunalchéesh awewe atcha. So that is how I was taught to say, thank you for the food, right? So you don't even need the word for in there, right? Like, because the languages just don't work the same, which is fine. So it's very short. So you could say gunalchéesh we, and then it's saying that. And then you could just name, so someone gets you coffee. Gunalchéesh we coffee, right? And you could tie it to another verb if you're trying to get fancy. Thank you for giving me this coffee. But so that's, and then you could just say gunalchéesh on its own, right? Thank you. But then there's times where it means something a little different. So when I go to Teslin, there's some speakers there. It seems like every time I see them, the way they greet me is they say, gunalchéesh ichsatini. Anybody want to take a crack at translating that? Gunalchéesh ichsatini.
Gunalchéesh. Thank you. It's good to see you.
Yeah, so the second part is like, I see you. And so when we tie these things directly together, I think of it as like, I'm thankful to have seen you. But it's sort of like, it's really interesting to me that that word works like that. Because, and then I've heard people say, gunalchéesh KTOO. And so for me, gunalchéesh KTOO. I am feeling thankful. So if the second part of the phrase is KTOO. And so like just sort of looking at how these go together, yeyati is it or they are that way. And then achtuwu. Achtuwu is my feelings, my spirits, my intentions. So it's just sort of describing how you're feeling. And there's lots of ways to do this. We'll get into this sort of thing on talking about emotions and feelings, which I think is really good to learn how to do. Because sometimes it's, sometimes wasa'iyati is more than just, hey, you, right? Sometimes you want to know how someone's doing. And if you know someone well, sometimes it's not always good, right? Sometimes you're grumpy and sometimes you're sad and sometimes you're lonely and sometimes you're elated and sometimes, all kinds of things. Um, but when we put that together and then we say ikach for you, right? It's a kind of a different way to say for you. A lot of times, this is sort of putting a certain sort of feeling on someone. So, like, I could also say, ikach ach tuwu klere. And so, what the ach tuwu klere does here is, I am proud. And just as far as Tlingit manners go, uh, if someone asks you how you're doing, ach tuwu klere is not a great answer. And ach tuwu is also not a great answer because they sound like you're kind of bragging a little bit. And I want people to feel good about themselves for sure, confident. But a lot of times, for context, it's better to be proud of a person than just generally proud, which is interesting because like sometimes, especially I think in the 2000s, in the aughts, there were these shirts that came out. They're like native pride, right? And it was it was a cool thing because sometimes there's a lot of people trying to make you feel ashamed of being an indigenous person. And so I understand, but like then people are like, how do I say this in Tlingit? And I say, you don't, because you should be, you have a lineage and you have these things that are part of your identity, but you don't walk around and be like, cool, right? And so there's always these lines we sort of try and um, navigate. And same with feeling courage. Like you might want to sort of, in those things, like, so, achtuwutlitzin means I feel, my spirit is strong, my feelings are strong, I feel brave. And that's good. But we don't want people to just maybe just go around and say that. And so, achtuwutlitzin. So, but maybe if you're getting ready to go do something that's going to be difficult, you can go get that neixeenté and you're scared, you might say that to yourself. Or it's even better, I think, from a Tlingit perspective, you say it to someone you're with. Etuuklitsin, be brave, as a command. And then, so it seems like to me like you're supposed to help other people instead of sort of blowing yourself up. Which, but these are always interesting things because I think they're not always super clear cut things. But then as we started learning Tlingit, there's a whole group of us that were learning in the early 2000s. We got all excited and we'd start using these phrases. And it was always the elders who would tamp it down a little. And they were so gracious about it. Like, that's wonderful. But, so then they'd give us course correction on how to sort of generally exist. Okay. Great questions. Anything else? Should we work?
I have one.
Mhm.
I think I saw you maybe on Twitter talking about the names of Mount Juneau and how the faces of the mountain have different names. And so I think I was familiar with Yada'a Katle, which is the part that faces the channel, which is why the high school is named that. But there's another name for the side that faces downtown.
I actually think that's the name of the side that faces downtown because it's got a little
Ah,
sort of sparkliness to it. I think the side that faces the channel is called Shatlach. So Shatlach is a moldy mountain. And I just think they didn't want to give that name to the high school because you know how people, they already like, a lot of people living on our land are really weird about our language. And so, and then also like sometimes, you know, I don't want to tell too many stories, but I know someone who's like, my name is Mother of the Mountain. I was like, oh, cool. What's your name? And she said it. I was like, oh, that's Moldy Gumboot. And it really hurt her feelings. But I was like, no, it's a good thing. You got to think about it in Tlingit. Not everything, just if you think about it in English, you can get mad. If you think about it in Tlingit, like, hey, Gumboot's been there. It's staying strong. It's Tutlewut. Nothing's going to get it off of that rock. And I don't know if I turned the tide strong enough. But so, Yada at Kashe. I think that's the one that faces, it's kind of the more steeper, rockier side. And then that's why it's because it's usually got like kind of a sparkliness to it. And then you have where someone built that big thing that's up there. I don't know what it is. But that one I think is Tlach. Then you go a little further next to that one, it's Katlach, which is moldy on top. And then if you go over to the one that stretches around, kind of a longer ridge over by Search and Bartlett Hospital. That's Katlach Ginny. So it's the arm of Katlach. But yeah, I think we're going to do like a whole video series, like really short, one name at a time type of thing, so we can really encourage the use of these. Because then we could start using them as we, you know, Katlach Ginny. I'm I'm going to drive over to the base of Katlach Ginny, which we could
yeah,
say.
I think it's really important. I mean, we're trying to sort of try to use more place names. But it's hard because people are always just like, what's the name for Mount Juno? And we want an easy translation, but it's so much more important once you get into knowing that, like, it depends on where you are on the mountain. Like, we don't just name things to name things. Like, that's a very different way of just like giving one mountain one name, is not sort of recognizing its different uses, its different contexts. It's a different place depending on where you're coming from.
Yeah, right. And a lot of it probably comes down to how often it was used. Like, how much did people go up there? If they're going there a lot, then there's probably a few different names because they need to say where we're going to meet after we get this goat, and so stuff like that. Okay, good cheese. Anything else? Because I know it's been a while, so I know you've been just sitting on these questions as they bubble up in your wonderful minds. Well, I was thinking of what to do, and I think we'll do feelings. I think we'll just I think it's really interesting to look at how emotions work in Tlingit. And I think it's a good starting point of getting back into Tlingit. And we're going to try and get through the whole range of emotions. Everybody's going to feel certain ways sometimes. And we do have an elder that we work with quite a bit who's in Carcross. And sometimes he'll get a little upset because he doesn't like to say the negative feelings because he's a real old schooler. He's like, you're going to just talk that thing right into being. And that's how you're going to be. So we're conscious of that. We don't want anybody to feel bad. But I do think it's important when you're talking Tlingit with your close friends to say, I'm sad. Because then they can help you out. That's what we're supposed to do, help each other. And just sort of, I think it's interesting to look at these and to see how they work too. Like structurally, how do we talk about this? And you're going to see some patterns that start to emerge here in terms of when you're talking about the tu. And just remember this, tu is thoughts. Tuwa is wanting or desiring. Tu, tuwa, tu, tuwa. And we are going to get those mixed up sometimes. So you might be saying, I'm happy. You might be trying to say, I'm happy, but then you might be saying, I want it. And some people be like, what? This new sweater I just got? So, but don't worry. Also, don't worry. Don't let these things stop you. I like to share all these different stories about people using the language, learning the language, having fun. And sometimes things are fun, but don't get embarrassed. Even if something funny happens, your name will always be redacted from the future narratives. So, and I've done all kinds of funny stuff too. Like one time I was trying to tell a story about I was trying to translate a story an elder just told me where they saw a black bear on the side of the road that had been hit by a car and it hadn't been killed but was stunned. And so they talked about it and said, well, we got to get off the road so it doesn't get killed. So there's like three or four of them and they worked to drag it into the ditch. And then they were on their way to go hunting. And then when they went to their spot, like these moose just walked right out and they just got them like instantly. And they were saying we think it's because we helped that black bear. And I was trying to tell us like, oh, let me try and translate that in Tlingit. And black bear is seek, and a belt is seek, and a daughter would be seek. And I told that story and I accidentally used all three of those words. And I wanted to just say black bear and I just watched her face get really kind of, what? And so it's okay. I think if you're making mistakes, that means you're using the language, right? It doesn't mean we just go reckless, careless, but we have to give ourselves this room and forgiveness to navigate that. Because the more you speak, the more you can hear yourself and you'll catch things. So generally when people speak to me in Tlingit, I don't stop them or correct them. So if you come talk to me in Tlingit, I'm not gonna be like, oh, you need to like really put the adjective on the end of that. I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna talk to you. I don't care if we're understanding each other or not. Like that makes me really happy to talk to people in Tlingit. Speaking of happy, Okay, we'll do this in 3 parts. Everybody say ach,
Ach.
ach,
Ach.
tu,
To
tu, tu, sigu, 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 ach, tu, sigu, ach, tu, sigu, ach, tu, sigu. Okay, so just a couple of notes. When you see ach, that is my. Chat is me. Those are related things, but they are different. So sometimes I will hear people say chat tu, ach tu is mine. This is the part that can change. So you could say ituwu, your feelings, ach tuwu, my feelings. So this is my feelings, thoughts, intentions, spirit, happy. So sigu is happy and joy. Um, and then we can switch that. And so we'll just work on this end part. So you can feel good and happy. Those are pretty related concepts. But so this last part here, yak a. Yak a.
Yuck.
Yak a.
Yuck.
Ach, ach tuwu yak a.
Ach.
Ach tuwu yak a. Ach So there, now we got the good stuff right out of the gate. This one, you can use this if anything good happens. Like if one of the things to become a speaker Tlingit on Tlingit land is I think you just start replacing certain words. Nothing bad's gonna happen. English will be okay. Everybody around you will be okay. And then people will start to learn, oh, I like to say cool, rad, awesome, sweet. I can say yuck a. All of those things. And then I could start to learn how to say kunach yuck a. It's really good. Tachwasa yuck a. Ah, it's super so good. It's better than everything, right? So you can learn how to do that stuff. But for now, like this could be a word you use all the time. So then to say I am good, and this needs context, we'll get to that, but let's just say it. So here's this, see this ach and this chat, those are two different things. My and me. My and me. So everybody say chat. 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 Yak a. Chat yak a.
Yuck.
Chat yak a.
Yuck.
Gunalchéesh. So I'm good.
I'm good.
Yeah, I am good. I have been told you got to be a little careful. Like sometimes ach tu yak a, I feel good, is better because you don't want this might be like popping the jersey, but oh, I'm good. Man, I'm so good. But in the context, maybe like this is a Tlingit Dungeons and Dragons world, and someone's like, "Are you evil or good?" Okay, I'm good. Because there is an opposite of this, which means to be bad or evil. But we're not gonna do that. We'll get to that one. Ask questions if you got them, or else we'll just keep going through. This one's long, but I think it's fun. My uncle Johnny Marks used to say this. So here we have this HTL. So there's my feelings in this case, or my spirit. And then this means flew around. So the first part is ut. Everybody say that. Ut.
At.
Ut.
At.
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 Woodkin.
Woodekeen.
Woodkin.
Woodekeen.
Woodkin.
So you do have back K. A little bit of a trickier sound.
Woodkin.
The other thing as we look at these, like just look at the vowels. Short, low, long, low, short, high, short, high, short, low, long, low. Uh, oh, oh, eh.
To. At. At.
Achtu atwudakin.
To. Woodkin.
Achtu atwudakin.
To. At. Woodkin.
Achtu atwudakin.
Woodkin.
Gunalchéesh. Okay, so down here, this is strong on its own, but strong spirit, strong feelings. I feel brave. So we got this to part. So everybody say shitseen.
Ah.
This is the last part. Shitseen.
Fifteen.
Seen.
Shitseen.
Seen.
Fifteen.
Shitseen.
Fifteen.
Seen. Seen.
Ach, shitseen.
Ah.
Fifteen.
Ach, to wushitseen.
To Seen. Ach, to Litzen.
Ach, to wushitseen.
Ach.
Fifteen.
Okay. Okay, that's page 1 down. 10 more to go. And then I'll put this up there. It'll be on our class page. So you go to klinkitlanguage.com, learning Tlingit, and then you'll see for the KTOO Aware class. And then I'll just post like a recording of this so you can review it. And then I'll also put these up there. And we'll probably make a video that just sort of goes. Yeah, see a hand up. What's up?
I just have a comment because I feel calm coming up, and that's the one that has to do with slack tide, right?
Yes.
It really helps my brain. Like I'll never forget that one because I just thought that was so beautiful when we talked about it last semester. And so I'd love to hear more about, is it transliteration when it's not like the words don't match up, right? Like slack tide and calm, but I just love hearing your knowledge about that.
It comes back to this, like there's lots of metaphor in Tlingit, and some of them you make directly. Like there's ways to directly make these metaphors. It's as if this thing, right? And so you could do those, and if the more the moment calls for medicinal language, the more you're going to engage deliberately in metaphor. But then there's times where it's just sort of this direct sort of visual sort of thing, smush them right up. And one of the things you'll find is moving fast leads to chaos in Tlingit. So for example, if I need to tell someone to hurry up, I'd say shittawut. So shittawut would be hurry yourself. But that verb root, woot, is used for adawut, which is war. And so for the Tlingit mind, it's sort of like if things move fast, if things move fast, then they tend to spin out of control. So Tlingit really likes, and especially like we're water people, we're ocean going people. So much of our metaphors have to do with chutliacheti, it's like a whirlpool. And then kattaquhin yacheti, it's like the water that was calm long enough that the sediment settled. And there's kind of a lot to this. For me, it goes back to things my grandpa used to tell me that his dad used to tell him. His dad was an Katachtzin Bert Dennis, and my grandpa was Gushtahin Sai Dennis. And he said my grandpa would always sort of, the more angry he got, the longer he took to respond to something, which I think is not always the way things go today. And so for that, like he'd say, well, I better really go think about this before I do anything, because I might do the wrong thing just because I'm angry. And so with this, like we also pay a lot of attention to the tides. And in the tides, like when it comes in and then before it sort of comes out, you have this moment where it's just sort of really calm and you get like this really glassy water. And that's where you get this phrase here. So it's like before you got big motion when the tide comes in, you got big motion when the tide goes out. But then you do have these still moments when it starts to go through this turn. And this also relates to how we deal, like coming back to emotions is how do we deal with emotions. And so for Tlingit, like the big one is probably grief and loss. And that could be for a whole wide variety of things, but losing a fellow human being or something that particularly happens to you. And then we got a bunch of phrases. Like if you're really interested, I highly recommend browsing the book Hatu Nagu Yis by Nora Marks Dowenhauer and Richard Dowenhauer. And they're just speeches, a whole bunch of ceremonial speeches, but that's where they would talk about stuff like this to ease your pain, to help your feeling. Because basically the way it worked is something really bad happened. People would have an intense period of mourning, and they usually lasted about a year. And after that year, it's not like you couldn't do anything else, but there's this expectation that we're going to start to now ourselves turn that whole tide. And there's intention. So they would cover people's face. Like if you were really in mourning, like say you lost someone really close to you, a parent, a child, a partner, then you would cut your hair and you would wear black on your face. And people would see it. They would just see it and they'd say, okay, there's someone who's in mourning. And they would have a lot more compassion towards you. And they would have a lot more gentleness, I think. There's these weird reputations out there that Tlingit people are just mean and angry. But I think like that's the interpretation of people just taking everything from us. Like, gosh, they're so mean. I don't know. I like took all their land and I tried to kill their language. And I don't understand why they're so grumpy. I think that's like such a simple sort of stereotype. But when you really get into the language, you find all these things about how much we care for each other and how we take care of each other. And then, so you would have a cry song, and there would be a series of cry songs to start the ceremony, the release of grief. And everybody really kind of lets it go. They really, really let it go. And then their opposite plan. So if they're ravens, the eagle people will get up and physically wipe that black and their tears from their face. And then they have a releasing of the grief ceremony that involves a chant and usually a staff. And like they do this thing 4 times. They would do a hook, which is hui. After that 4th time, excuse me, someone usually gives the release of grief speech. And they've been selected to do it. They've thought about it a lot. Giving a Tlingit speech, you work your way up to this. You don't have to start with this, but you're not supposed to write it down. You're not supposed to have any notes. You're not supposed to like take a peek at your hand. You're supposed to just have it. So, no pressure now, but if you do this for a long time, there might be expectations. Like you get down, and even if you did a wonderful job, someone probably say, "That was amazing." You shouldn't read from your notes, right? So, but then they're going to bring out the meal. But before they bring out the meal, They're going to make an offering to all the ancestors for the food and the intentions. Then as that food's being brought out, they're going to really try to get people to laugh. And if you really live our culture, like it's such a joyous time to see that it's almost like that tide goes in, that tide comes out. And so you have to be really intentional and cautious during those times. And you're really trying to get people, you're telling jokes, you're telling stories, you're really laughing, and you're thinking, this is what my loved one would want, is for me to be in joy. And so it was the way I was told, it was always the leaders who were in charge of doing this stuff. They had to get people really laughing because they say, there's another Tlingit thing that I was taught. However you feel when you eat, you're going to feed those feelings. So if you're angry and you eat, you're going to be more angry. So they would always try to get people laughing and feeling joy so that when they eat, then they would feel that joy. Okay, so I want to get back to Sasha Gao. She had a question, I think. Itchnagu di dushdachteich heitl an chawu katligas sagwad chatuj yachyati yaktei an chawu tuj chatleit yachyati. I would probably say, if you're talking about cats, gwellier, I would probably say deich douche. So katligas, it's striped. Ka tuj yachyati, that works. Underline the ka, underline and tuj chatleit yachyati. Yeah. Itch ach itchnagudi. So they're following me. Two cats are following me. Is that right? I would say ach itch has naati. And if it's happening right now, I'd probably say ach itch ya has naati. They're following because it should switch to plural form.
Oops.
Okay.
We tried.
Oh, ach itchnagudi as a noun. I see. Dech, decheti. You can say decheti. Apushi. Oh, God of Thunder. Okay, okay. Okay, that's a good question. Like if we're going to translate sort of concepts like that too. Um, they would probably be, I'd probably call them tsate. So maybe like hate tsate. But that would be an interesting thing because hate is a big powerful thing in Tlingit. It's not just thunder, but it's also the thunderbird. So those two things are related. So we might have to manufacture a different name for Thor. Fun. Okay. Shtuk chatehin. I have. Oh, shtuk. Oh, okay. So there's another question that's coming through. Someone asks shtuk. So there's a phrase shtuk chatehin. I believe in myself. So this phrase, I'll put this up here for everybody. I'll put it in the chat. And let me check something real quick. I do believe this one's in our verb list. So let me switch here. Okay. So getting into the verb list, if you haven't used this before, there's a whole list of verb roots. And then next to them is a kind of what that root means. So a verb root contains meaning. So there's another heen, which is to water something, right? It means like water it down or mix it with water. This one is to believe or to trust. So when you click on this blue text, you can expand it, and everything in yellow is a different verb that is within this verb root. So from a root, you can build different verbs. And we see two of them here: to believe someone, to trust them, or to trust oneself, or to have confidence. So, starting with the bottom one, this SH, so this is inside, tuk, right? So this tu is inside with this K suffix on it. So in this case, the SH is one's self. So we've learned, a lot of us have learned, ach, I, du, ach, I, du, my, your, their, my, your, their, for, as in like whose thing it is. But there's also chush or an SH, which means my own self. So whenever you have shtu in front of a verb, that's usually actually two different words that just kind of smash together, inside myself. Then there's all kinds of things that could come after that. And in this case, you have believe. So this phrase to say, I have confidence in myself. And again, this is probably one you don't say to everybody because you might look like you're bragging. And we're always careful of that. But if you need to like, sometimes you just need to kind of like, let's say you have to go you have to give that removal of grief speech because you've worked your way up as a language speaker and you've become good at making metaphors. And your job right now is to turn that whole tide of emotion. You might have to say this to your, backstage or whatever. Stuk achtehin. And it's good. I think it's like a self-affirmation. It's beautiful. It has that function. But just don't say it in front of all the people because they'll be like, gee, this guy so full of himself, right? But again, useful stuff. So let's try this one and then I'll talk about the second one. So everybody say shtuk. Shtuk.
Sounds like two.
Shtuk.
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 Yes, okay, so in the sounds like, be sure you get the right sound. This is a K, it's an ejective K, or we call it a pinched K. Just like a regular K sound, k, k, k. But we hold our breath when we make that sound. K, k, k. So you gotta get that shtuk. We gotta hear that hard click. That's not going to the back of the throat. This one is an underline key.
Me with the strict, young, dumb, and excited. You're like, whoa. Temper this excitement.
Okay. If this were an underline K, you wouldn't have tuk, you would have tuk, and that is a butt, like a booty. So you just want to make sure that you're saying shtuk. And then the second part is the verb, which is achtehin.
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 And a phrase like this as well is like, believe in yourself. Like this language is right here, ready for you to become a speaker of it, to engage in it, to use it, to keep learning, to keep teaching, to keep using it. And a lot of that does require a lot of belief in yourself. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if sometimes I'm gonna make a mistake. I'm just gonna try. I'm just gonna try. But this one is really interesting here because there are ways to say like I believe what they said. Oops, I forgot the negative one. So here. So this one, if to say I believe in someone, you'd say this one would change a little bit. So you'd say du ik achahin. So this you'd X and two A's. A underline X, A. So that part would look like this. And so here, if you wanted to say, so here's de, but what if I wanted to say, I believe you? I have trust in you. Any predictions? That would be they believe in me. So that, but this is the part we are changing. So if this changes to ach, now I'm the one who's being believed in. Ik achahin. I believe in you. I trust you. And it is. It's not saying like, it depends on the context, because it could be, you know, I had this delicious piece of pie and I left the room and you were here and I came back and the pie is gone and you got crumbs on your face. Aduchsacha awe ya'ach atchai. Who ate my food? If you said kachach, wasn't me, then I might have to say kasheik achayin. I don't believe you. But I wouldn't say it, but in another case, there's no evidence, no big crumbs. I might use this one. Gunalchéesh Yuhan. We'll pick up with this one, achtuwu wuduwaga. And I'll work on the next week or so of making just a little recording of these so you have them. And it'll be a kind of a speed thing without really huge explanations, but just sort of like this one, say it, and just repeating it a couple times. But I like to go through it too and see how these things work. Like this one is like, my spirit has been like a blanket that's been spread out on the floor. There's like really cool like stuff in here in terms of how Tlingit people think about things, how we do things. And it's important to sort of see because there's a lot of understanding that goes behind it. It's gunalchéesh. I'll be back in Juneau next week and we will see you all then.
Right.
Gunalchéesh. Yeah,
Gunalchéesh.
Gunalchéesh.
Gune. Hey, can you hear me okay? Where's my microphone thing? There it is. Dun, dun, dun. I feel like Janet Jackson. Rhythm Nation. Will you be here Monday?
I'll be coming back from Petersburg. I'll get in the afternoon.
Do you have plans in the evening? There's a vigil for Tracy Day at 5 o'clock at the Whale.
I teach at 5:30.